The rain falls softly, each drop a whisper against the windowpane, as a fragile figure stands alone in the cold glow of the restaurant's flickering neon sign. Her trembling hands clutch a worn clutch, trembling as much from shame as from the storm inside her heart. The hum of distant thunder echoes her heartbeat, loud, unrelenting, and in that fleeting moment the world seems to hold its breath. This is the story of the humble bride who was thrown out of a restaurant for not paying, until the rich neighbor arrived in. The night air is thick with silence, broken only by the faint sound of raindrops dancing on the pavement. She feels the sting of tears threatening to fall, yet she refuses to let them. Her dress, once pristine, now clings to her in damp despair. Every detail is etched into her memory: the cold glare of the waiter, the whisper of her empty pockets, the humbling realization that she's been cast out into the darkness. And yet, amidst the shadows, an unspoken hope flickers. It's as if the universe itself pauses, waiting to reveal what lies beyond this moment of humiliation. For in the quiet, a new chapter begins to stir, a chapter not written by shame, but by the silent strength that refuses to surrender. The scene is set, the story unfolding at the crossroad of vulnerability and resilience. Because sometimes, life's most profound moments are born from the cracks in our armor, from the rain that washes away our fears, revealing the fragile beauty of the human spirit. And as the night deepens, so does the promise that even in our darkest hours, there is a light waiting just beyond the storm. This is the beginning of her journey, where humility meets unexpected grace, and where the shadows give way to hope. Stay with us, for what happens next will remind us all that sometimes, the greatest stories emerge from the humblest beginnings. She stands alone in the cold, her shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. The rain has softened into a gentle mist, but her eyes remain dry, haunted by a quiet ache that lingers deep within. Her dress clings to her like a second skin, damp, fragile, revealing the vulnerability she tries so desperately to hide. There's a tremor in her hands, not from the chill of the night, but from the ache of rejection that's carved itself into her soul. Every step she takes feels heavier, as if the ground beneath her remembers what she's lost: her dignity, her hope, perhaps even her future. In the flickering glow of the neon sign, she looks smaller than she is, like a fragile blossom battered by relentless storms. Her heart beats unevenly, a fragile rhythm that echoes her loneliness, a silent symphony of grief and quiet despair. She is no stranger to hardship. Life has carved deep scars into her spirit, each one a reminder of battles fought in silence. Loneliness has become her closest companion, a shadow that trails her in every crowded room and quiet corner. She's learned to wear her pain like a thin veil, hiding her tears behind a veneer of quiet resilience, but tonight, that veneer feels too thin. The ache of rejection settles heavily in her chest, an unspoken grief that she whispers to no one, an ache of feeling unseen, unvalued, discarded. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, now flicker with a fragile hope that refuses to fade completely. It's as if her very presence is a testament to resilience, even if she feels shattered inside. She gazes at the empty streets, the rain washing away her footprints, just as life seems to be washing away her hopes. Yet in her silence, there's a quiet beauty, an unspoken strength that whispers softly, reminding her that even in her most vulnerable moments, she is still here, still fighting to find her place. She wonders if anyone sees her, not the tears she tries to hide, not the pain she bears silently. She feels the cold wind brush against her skin, a gentle reminder that life's storms can leave us battered but not broken. Her story is one of quiet endurance, a testament to the resilience that blooms in the shadows of hardship. She stands at the edge of a new dawn, battered but unbowed, waiting for a sign that even amidst loss and loneliness, there is still a flicker of hope, something worth holding onto before the night begins to lift. And in that fragile moment, she begins to realize that sometimes, it's through our greatest pain that we find our truest strength. The night may be long, but dawn is always waiting just beyond the horizon. As the rain continued its quiet descent, a figure appeared at the corner of the street, his silhouette faint against the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. He was an ordinary man, weathered by years of working beneath the weight of everyday life, wrinkles etched into his face like the lines of a well-worn map, eyes that carried the stories of countless dawns and dusks. He paused for a moment, noticing her standing there, her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the empty pavement like a fragile vessel caught in a storm it couldn't control. There was no grand gesture, no sweeping words, just a hesitant step closer, a quiet curiosity that didn't demand attention but simply acknowledged her presence. He carried a plastic bag filled with what looked like groceries, but it was the small, almost imperceptible act of him slowing his pace that caught her attention. Maybe it was the way he hesitated, unsure if he should say something, or perhaps just observing her in her silent pain. His eyes flickered with a flicker of empathy, imperfect, human, real. A man who knew hardship intimately, not because he'd read about it in books, but because he had lived it. He looked down at her, and for a moment, the rain seemed to hush, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Without a word, he gently placed the bag on a nearby bench and reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled paper tissue, an act so simple, yet oddly profound in its humility. He offered it silently, a quiet gesture that spoke volumes about kindness that doesn't ask for recognition. Her eyes flickered with surprise, a flicker of gratitude passing through the fog of her despair. She hesitated, then took the tissue, her fingers trembling slightly. He nodded softly and took a step back, not expecting anything in return. His presence was not a miracle, just a reminder that even in the smallest acts, there is a quiet grace. The rain continued to fall around them, a gentle symphony of hope and despair intertwined, but in that moment, a subtle shift occurred. She looked at the tissue, then back at him, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared humanity. No words were exchanged, only a silent understanding that kindness often manifests in the simplest acts, an offer of comfort, a moment of being seen. As he turned to walk away, he glanced back once, offering a faint, imperfect smile, one that held no promises, only the truth of his own flawed humanity. The rain washed over his figure, blending him into the dimness of the night, yet his quiet act lingered like a faint echo, a reminder that sometimes, the smallest gestures can light the way through darkness. She watched him disappear into the mist, feeling the dampness of the tissue in her hand and the warmth of a fleeting human connection. It was enough to stir a fragile hope within her, that even in the midst of loneliness, kindness can quietly bloom in unexpected moments. The night's shadows still clung to her, but for the first time, she felt a gentle pull towards something beyond despair, a whisper that perhaps she was not entirely alone. And as she looked down at the tissue, the rain seemed to soften, the world a little more forgiving. Sometimes, it's not grand gestures but simple acts that plant the seeds of hope, quietly waiting to bloom with patience and time. In the days that followed, the rain seemed less relentless, but the ache inside her remained, the ache of being unseen, of carrying burdens too heavy for one person alone. She often found herself wandering the quiet streets, the world around her still bustling, yet she felt invisible, like a ghost lingering in the shadows. Then, almost imperceptibly, small acts began to break through her solitude. One morning, she noticed him again, her quiet neighbor, at the corner of the street, carefully balancing a steaming cup of coffee and a small paper bag. Without a word, he approached her, offering the cup with a gentle, tentative smile. The warmth of the coffee seeped into her trembling hands, and for a moment, her fingers curled instinctively around it, craving the simple comfort of a hot drink. She accepted silently, her eyes meeting his, an unspoken understanding passing between them. It was nothing grand, just a shared moment of kindness that felt like a fragile bridge over her loneliness. Later, on a day when the sky threatened to open again, she found herself caught beneath a narrow awning, her umbrella forgotten at home. She fidgeted, trying to shield herself from the rain, when she saw him approaching with his own battered umbrella. Without hesitation, he offered it, stepping closer to shield her from the downpour. She hesitated, her pride, perhaps, or the fear of imposing, but he simply looked at her with gentle insistence, waiting patiently for her to accept. When she finally nodded, he held the umbrella over both of their heads, their shoulders inches apart, the rain drumming a soft rhythm around them. In that quiet, shared space, her breathing slowed, and her heart, stubbornly guarded, softened just a little. The following days brought more small gestures. She noticed him often passing by her modest home, each time stopping briefly to leave a small wrapped piece of bread or a handful of fresh fruit on her doorstep. Just enough to brighten her day, just enough to remind her she was not entirely alone. When she was too weary to cook, he'd sometimes knock softly and leave a simple meal, warm soup or a slice of bread, wrapped in cloth, respectful and unobtrusive. Each act was plain, almost mundane, but to her, it felt like tiny lifelines woven into her quiet existence. One evening, as she sat on a weathered bench in the park, clutching her coat tightly around her, he approached again, this time with a worn but soft blanket. He offered it with a humility that made her want to protest, to refuse, but instead she accepted, feeling the gentle weight of it drape over her shoulders. The simple gesture was a quiet promise that she didn't have to face the cold alone, that even imperfect kindness could warm the most fragile parts of her soul. Throughout these moments, her world quietly shifted, each small gesture peeling away the layers of her isolation, revealing fragments of human connection she had long believed lost. It wasn't about grand salvation or sweeping change, but about the gentle, persistent ways people can reach out, sharing a cup, offering shelter from the rain, leaving a piece of bread on a doorstep. These acts became quiet anchors, grounding her in the understanding that even in her vulnerability, she was seen, valued, and cared for in ways she had not dared to hope. But beneath the surface, the external world was gathering storm clouds. Rumors, misunderstandings, and the weight of unseen conflicts loomed, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they'd begun to build. The gentle acts of kindness, so carefully woven into her daily life, now faced the test of external chaos, a reminder that even the smallest gestures are vulnerable to the storms that rage beyond our control. Yet, in her heart, she clings to those moments, knowing that love, in its purest form, is often built on the quiet strength of simple kindness, waiting patiently for its moment to shine amidst the chaos. The quiet of the evening was suddenly shattered by the sharp clang of a door slammed shut across the street. Her heart jolted, and she looked up from her small, makeshift refuge, a worn bench beneath a flickering street lamp, her senses suddenly alert. From her spot, she saw him emerge hurriedly from his modest home, his face tense, eyes flickering with worry. The air grew thick with tension as murmurs rippled through the community, whispers carried by the wind like dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Rumors had begun to swirl, stories twisted into something unrecognizable, fueled by gossip and judgment that spread faster than the rain. Her fragile sanctuary, built on small acts of kindness and quiet companionship, suddenly felt fragile indeed, vulnerable to the storm brewing outside. She watched as he approached, visibly tense, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by a guarded stiffness. The community's gaze was heavy, scrutinizing, as if each word spoken behind closed doors was a blade aimed at tearing apart what little she had managed to rebuild. Her mind spun with doubt. Was it her fault? Had her presence somehow become a catalyst for judgment? She clutched her coat tighter, feeling the weight of their collective disapproval pressing down like a storm surge ready to drown her fragile hope. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently took her by the arm, guiding her to stand, though she hesitated, the fear of exposure gripping her. Her eyes darted around, catching snippets of whispered accusations, the pointed fingers, the disapproving glares that seemed to pierce right through her. She could hear the distant echo of a neighbor's voice, sharp and critical, questioning her worth, her choices, her very right to belong. The community's judgment was a wall she could no longer see over, threatening to crush the fragile threads of trust she had begun to weave. In that moment, doubt seeped into her soul. Was her kindness, her quiet resilience, enough to withstand the storm? Would this outsider's support be enough to hold her up against the relentless tide of gossip and rejection? The air around them grew heavy, oppressive, as if the very atmosphere conspired to drown out their fragile connection. Her breath caught in her chest, tears threatening to spill, not just from the pain of rejection but from the terrifying realization that everything they'd built could be swept away in a single gust of community's harsh judgment. Yet, amidst the chaos, she glimpsed a flicker of something, a faint, steadying presence in his eyes. No words were spoken, only a silent promise that he wouldn't abandon her in this storm. His grip tightened just slightly, not out of desperation, but with a quiet resolve to stand firm, to face whatever came, even if it meant risking his own standing. Because sometimes, loyalty doesn't roar loudly or sweep through like a hero's rescue. It simply whispers in small, steadfast acts, holding, supporting, quietly refusing to let go. As the crowd's whispers faded into a distant hum, she felt the cold wind bite through her layers, yet beneath that chill, a small ember of hope flickered. The external storm was fierce, and doubt clawed at her resolve, but in his unwavering presence, she found a fragile strength. The night sky, once clouded and threatening, slowly revealed a faint glimmer of stars, reminders that even the darkest storms eventually give way to dawn. The outside world might try to drown their bond in waves of judgment, but the quiet loyalty that had begun to grow between them was a seed that refused to be uprooted by fear. It was a reminder that sometimes, the greatest test of love is not in grand gestures, but in the silent resilience of two hearts committed to weathering the storm together, no matter how fierce the wind blows. The night stretched long, heavy with unspoken fears and the lingering echoes of judgment. Yet, through it all, he remained, an unyielding presence beside her, standing quietly at the edge of her trembling world. His shoulders were straight, not out of bravado, but because he had learned that sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty was simply to stay present, to refuse to be pushed away by the storm. He didn't speak much. Words felt unnecessary in the face of such raw vulnerability. Instead, he offered her his silence, an anchor amid the chaos, a steady heartbeat that reminded her she was not alone. When her eyes flickered with tears, he kept his gaze steady, a silent testament to unwavering support. Her breath hitched as she fought to contain the surge of emotion threatening to overflow, and he simply kept pace, walking beside her as if the world belonged to no one but them in that moment. His presence was neither dramatic nor heroic, just human, flawed, honest, real. His hand, resting lightly on her shoulder, was a quiet reassurance. No grand promises, only a steady reminder that she could lean on someone who refused to turn away. The community's whispers still echoed in her mind, but his steadfast silence acted as a shield, muffling the harsh words and replacing them with a gentle, unspoken strength. When she hesitated, unsure whether to retreat or stand firm, he didn't push or coax, he simply stayed, a constant in her shifting world. Sometimes he would glance at her, a soft, understanding look that carried the weight of his own imperfections, perhaps regret, perhaps empathy. Not perfect, just real. That was enough. As the night deepened, he found small ways to support her, offering to walk her home, carrying her burdens in quiet gestures, listening without judgment or expectation. When she stumbled over her words, he nodded patiently, as if her fears and doubts were valid and understood. When she shivered from the cold, he pulled his coat around her shoulders, not to fix her pain but to share in her discomfort, to stand with her in the face of it. Their connection grew in the spaces between words, through acts of patience, small acts of kindness that refused to be broken even by external storms. And in those moments, she began to feel something shifting deep within her, a fragile hope rooted in the simple certainty that she was not alone. His loyalty was a quiet river, flowing steadily beneath the surface, nourishing her growing strength. She saw how he faced the external chaos, not with grand gestures or heroic speeches, but with unwavering presence, a steady hand that never wavered. It was enough to whisper to her soul that even amidst the fiercest storms, there are anchors, people who stand firm, not to save us from our struggles, but to walk alongside us as we navigate through them. Her heart, once battered and guarded, started to open slowly, like a flower reaching toward the faint light of dawn. The night around them remained dark, filled with the shadows of doubt and fear, but inside her, a flicker of resilience ignited, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes, support is simply about showing up day after day, moment after moment, with patience and kindness. Her transformation was not sudden, it was a gentle unfolding, like the first light breaking through a cloudy sky. And in that light, she began to see herself, not as someone broken by hardship, but as someone quietly growing stronger, held upright by the steadfast presence of another imperfect human who refused to turn away. The night's shadows might still linger, but now, she knew that even in her most fragile moments, she could find strength in the simple, unwavering act of someone standing beside her, an imperfect, human reminder that loyalty and love often grow in the quietest of places, waiting patiently to bloom. Gradually, the weight that had pressed so heavily on her shoulders began to lift, not with a sudden burst of light, but like the slow emergence of dawn after a long, dark night. She found herself waking up with a different kind of quiet hope, a gentle whisper that maybe her worth wasn't tethered to circumstances beyond her control. The rain had washed away more than just the dirt on the streets. It seemed to cleanse the heaviness within her, revealing glimpses of a resilience she had long buried beneath layers of shame and fear. She started to notice small things again, the way the sunlight filtered through the cracks in the window, the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, the way her own reflection in the mirror held a softer, more forgiving gaze. Those moments became her quiet victories, each one nurturing her newfound belief that she was more than her setbacks. Her smile, once a rare thing rooted in fleeting happiness, grew more genuine and frequent. It was not the smile of someone pretending to be okay, but of someone beginning to remember who she was beneath the wounds, the woman who dreamed, who created, who had the power to build her own future. She picked up her old sketchbook, the pages blank and waiting, and let her pencil dance across them without judgment. Lines and colors poured out, no longer just expressions of her pain but symbols of hope and possibility. She started sharing her work with others quietly, without expectation, letting her art speak for her. With each stroke, she reclaimed her voice, her purpose blooming softly but surely within her. She found herself teaching others in small ways, showing a neighbor how to sew, sharing stories with a young girl in her community, encouraging someone else to find their own strength in vulnerability. Her worth no longer depended on external validation or rescue. It was rooted deep inside, forged by her own hands, her own resilience. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, became a reminder that her journey was hers alone, yet intertwined with those around her. Her mind filled with new dreams, of opening a small space where others could gather and create, of helping others find their voices as she was learning to do. She no longer saw herself as broken but as a vessel of quiet strength, capable of inspiring others simply by living her truth. Her past scars were now gentle reminders rather than burdens, each one a testament to her survival and growth. The woman who once stood alone in the rain, trembling and uncertain, now moved forward with a steady purpose. Her steps were no longer hesitant but purposeful, guided by an internal light that she had rekindled from within. She understood that her journey wasn't about waiting for salvation but about claiming her own worth and rewriting her story, one of resilience, hope, and quiet power. As she looked toward the horizon, she felt the faint but persistent glow of a new beginning, a promise that even in darkness, there's potential for growth and renewal. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained, shaping her into someone who knew her value didn't depend on anyone else's approval. She was finally learning that her worth was innate, a steady flame that no tempest could extinguish. And so, she stepped into the light, not as someone who had been rescued, but as someone who had rediscovered her strength, ready to face whatever came next with a heart full of hope and a spirit that refused to be broken again. The path ahead was hers to walk, illuminated by the quiet, unshakable truth that she was enough, just as she was, in this moment and every moment to come. The town square was alive with the hum of voices, the shimmer of lanterns casting a warm glow over gathered faces. It was an ordinary evening transformed by something extraordinary, an event that had grown from quiet courage into a shared celebration of change. She stepped onto the makeshift stage, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the weight of everything she had already endured. The crowd's eyes were gentle, expectant, waiting for her words. For a moment, her mind flickered back to the nights she had stood alone in the rain, feeling invisible, feeling broken. But tonight was different. Tonight she was here to speak, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been silenced by fear, shame, or rejection. She took a steadying breath, feeling the steady heartbeat of her community beneath her. Her voice, soft at first, grew stronger as she began to speak. She told her story, not the whole painful chapter, but the part where she found the courage to stand again. She spoke of resilience, of learning to love herself despite the scars, and of the quiet strength that had carried her through her darkest nights. Her words wove through the crowd, like a gentle river carving its way through stone, revealing a truth she had only recently come to realize. Her worth had always been there, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. She shared how her journey wasn't about grand rescues or miraculous moments, but about small, persistent steps, each one a testament to her inner strength, built day by day, breath by breath. As she spoke, she saw faces soften, eyes glisten with understanding, and hearts open in silent solidarity. The community was witnessing a transformation, one that wasn't loud or flashy but rooted in genuine courage. When she finally looked out over the crowd, her voice steadied, and she found the words that had been hiding in her heart. "I used to believe my worth depended on others' approval," she said, "but I've learned that the real strength comes from within. It's in our ability to stand tall, even when the world tries to make us feel small." A hush fell, as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for her to finish. And then, a gentle applause began, first hesitant, then growing into a wave of warm, heartfelt recognition. It was not just applause for her words, but for her bravery, the courage to face her fears in front of everyone, to let her vulnerability be seen and honored. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she let them fall, not as symbols of weakness, but as proof of her authenticity. She had stepped into the light, exposing her truth, and in doing so, she had unlocked a deeper connection with her community, one rooted in honesty, acceptance, and mutual respect. As she stepped down from the stage, she felt a new sense of belonging settle inside her, a quiet reassurance that her voice mattered. The crowd's applause echoed into the night, blending with the crackle of lanterns and the soft rustle of leaves. It was a moment of awakening, a collective recognition that courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to face it anyway. Her journey was no longer hers alone, it had become a shared story, woven into the fabric of the town's own tapestry of resilience. She looked around at the faces, familiar, welcoming, transformed, and felt a gentle surge of hope. This night marked not just her rebirth but the beginning of a new chapter for everyone present. The stars above shimmered softly, as if in quiet agreement, whispering that true strength shines brightest when we dare to show our authentic selves. The community had witnessed her vulnerability and celebrated her courage. Now they would walk forward, together, carrying the silent promise that no one would ever have to face their fears alone again. And with that, she stepped into the future, not as someone who had been rescued, but as someone who had reclaimed her power, inspiring others to find their own light amid the darkness. The night's gentle glow beckoned everyone to hold on to hope, to listen deeply, and to remember that true acceptance begins when we dare to reveal our truth, standing tall amid the stars. The old porch was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of dusk as a gentle breeze stirred the leaves. She stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes fixed on the worn wooden steps, an unspoken mixture of anticipation and vulnerability filling the space between her and the figure approaching slowly from the shadows. It was her father, or perhaps a father figure she'd longed for in her quiet moments of despair, a man whose rejection had once carved deep scars into her heart. Now, as he drew nearer, she saw the weight he carried in his shoulders, the lines etched by years of regret. Either of them rushed. Time had softened their edges, teaching them that some wounds heal only when given space, patience, and genuine remorse. As he reached her, he paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong," he finally whispered, voice trembling with the weight of unspoken truths. "I didn't see then what I see now, the strength in you, the courage you found to stand tall despite everything. I let my fears and doubts blind me. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only pushing you further away." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. She had waited so long for this moment, not for grand apologies or perfect words, but for acknowledgement, for a truth that could finally bridge the chasm between them. Her voice was steady but soft. "I needed you to see me, not just the struggles, but the strength I was trying to find myself. I needed to hear that I mattered, that my worth wasn't something I had to prove every day. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks as he reached out, taking her trembling hands in his. I see you now, he said, voice breaking. And I'm sorry for every time I turned away, for every moment I failed to understand. You've shown me what true strength looks like: resilience, hope, and the courage to keep going even when everything seems lost. The air seemed to hold its breath as they stood there, two souls finally meeting in the quiet space of honesty and forgiveness. No dramatic declarations, just raw, human recognition, an acceptance of past mistakes, and a commitment to move forward with humility. Her heart, which had once felt battered and uncertain, now felt the gentle warmth of understanding. She saw her own reflection in his tears, that shared vulnerability that came only when one truly admits fault and asks for forgiveness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she felt a quiet serenity settle over her. The long journey from rejection to reconciliation was not a swift ascent, but a slow, deliberate unfolding, each step marking growth and healing. She realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or erasing pain, it's about acknowledging it, understanding it, and choosing to let it go, so that love, fragile yet resilient, can take root once more. Her voice, steadier now, carried the weight of her truth. It took me a long time to see my own worth. But I've learned that healing begins when we accept our pain as part of our story and allow ourselves to forgive others and ourselves. The moment lingered, filled with unspoken promises and the quiet hope that their bond could be reborn, not as it once was, but stronger, rooted in honesty and acceptance. They stood together as the dusk deepened, the stars beginning to twinkle faintly above, a silent reminder that even in darkness, there is light, waiting patiently to be found. This was their redemption, earned through patience and heartfelt humility. And as she looked into his eyes, she understood that forgiveness is a quiet act of courage, a gentle revolution that transforms wounds into wisdom. It beckoned them to move forward, hand in hand, into a future where love could once again bloom, fragile but resilient, beneath the endless sky. With every breath, she felt the truth settle deep within her, a truth that whispered softly, "Healing begins when we dare to open our hearts, and love finds its way home, no matter how long the night." As the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, the world seemed to hold its breath in a moment of quiet rebirth. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, a delicate reminder that even after the darkest nights, the promise of new beginnings quietly awakens. The air was filled with a gentle stillness, the kind that settles deep into the bones, whispering that healing is a slow, patient unfolding, much like the dawn itself. Somewhere in the distance, birds began to sing, their melodies weaving through the silence like threads of hope, reminding us that life continues, softly and persistently, even after the deepest pain. In this tranquil scene, the story found its quiet conclusion, not with words, but with a visual symphony that echoes the core of every journey. Love is not a magic spell that erases wounds, but a testament that no one is truly alone in their suffering or their hope. The stars, faint yet steadfast, still shimmered faintly above, their distant light a reminder that even in moments of darkness, there exists an unshakable presence, silent, constant, and guiding us toward the dawn. They are the night's quiet witnesses, just as our love and resilience are the unseen anchors in our own stories of redemption. As the sun rises higher, casting its warm glow over the landscape, it illuminates the path ahead, one step at a time, slow and deliberate, rooted in understanding and forgiveness. The gentle hum of the morning breeze carries a message that healing cannot be rushed, but must be embraced with patience and compassion. Just as the earth slowly awakens, so must our hearts be open to the small, subtle miracles, moments of connection, acts of kindness, tender gestures, that remind us we are never truly alone, even in our most vulnerable hours. The scene is a quiet affirmation of resilience, a visual poetry that speaks to the human capacity to find light in the darkness. Love, after all, is not about perfect salvation but about the quiet strength we gather when we realize we are seen, heard, and held in the unknowable vastness of life's uncertainties. It's in these moments, the gentle dawn, the whispering wind, the rising sun, that we find proof that no one walks their path in solitude. Our stories, woven together with threads of hope and humility, remind us that even the smallest acts of presence and understanding can illuminate the way forward. So, let this be a gentle call to remember that your journey matters. That in your moments of vulnerability, you are not alone. That love, in its quiet resilience, is always there, waiting to be rediscovered, nurtured, and shared. As you step into your own dawn, carry with you the knowledge that every night gives way to morning, and every heart, no matter how battered, can find its rhythm again. If this story has touched your soul, consider sharing its gentle message. Like the stars that shimmer in the vast sky, your act of kindness can inspire someone else to believe in their own light. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the quiet strength within us all. And perhaps, in doing so, you'll help weave a tapestry of hope across the world, a testament that, together, we are never truly alone in our journey toward healing and love.